So I've been thinking about games that have cool aesthetics. And when I say aesthetic, I'm talking about unique settings, distinct art styles, cool user interfaces, and a strong musical identity. All of those things together are what define a game's aesthetic, in my opinion. There are plenty of games that have already been highly acknowledged for their aesthetic, like Persona 5, Earthbound, Jet Set Radio. So what I want to do is talk about some games that I think deserve more recognition for their aesthetic. And to make it interesting, these are actually ranked in order, starting with number 10, King of Fighters 11. So when it comes to fighting games and aesthetic, the big ones that you hear talked about a lot are games like Third Strike and King of Fighters 13. But King of Fighters 11 is one that I think needs to be included in the conversation more. Now, if you don't already know, King of Fighters 11 came out on the PS2 in 2005, and it was the second game in the series to use a tag system. And aesthetically, this game is clean, clear, and colorful. The design direction for the UI has white backgrounds with big bold fonts, bright colors, and a lot of circles. This combination gives the game a really upbeat, fun vibe. The pixel art in this game is also nice and was the last time SNK used their legacy sprite art before doing somewhat of a reboot of the series and switching over to the HD sprites that you see in King of Fighters 12 and 13. There's also a really interesting juxtaposition with the 2D sprites and the backgrounds being 3D. This gives KOF 11's aesthetic a very video gamey charm that I personally love. Number 9 on the list is Shin Megami Tensei 4. Now, Shin Megami Tensei 4 is the fourth mainline entry in the Megaten series and was released as a 3DS exclusive. Now, when it comes to Megaten, the games we usually hear about are Persona 5, and I'd even say Nocturne gets a good bit of praise for its atmosphere, but I think Shin Megami Tensei 4 also deserves some acknowledgement for several reasons. First reason being its setting. Spoilers before we continue, the game starts you off in this ancient samurai setting and then later has you go underground, only to discover that a post-apocalyptic futuristic Tokyo exists right beneath the samurai world. I know y'all might get tired of this word, but the juxtaposition here gives Shin Megami Tensei 4 a very unique visual and thematic identity where these traditional samurai aesthetics fuse with modern cyberpunk aesthetics. The UI for this game also pops. Whenever you arrive in a new area, your character pulls up a hologram that shows a map of the area. Very futuristic, very cyberpunk. The fusion menu has this pixelated talking head that adds to the futurism vibe also. And we can't forget about your computer companion Burroughs, who assists you throughout the game.
Master.
Throwing an amazing soundtrack on top of all that, and Shin Megami Tensei 4 is very incredible in terms of aesthetic. Number 8 on the list is going to be Megaman Legends for the PlayStation 1. The caveat with this one is that I do think the game's aesthetic is becoming more appreciated and acknowledged over time. You have recent indie games like Frogun or Say No More that borrow from Megaman Legends' low poly anime aesthetic. But on the flip side, we know the game didn't do that well when it originally launched, so it's underrated but not underrated at the same time. Either way, the aesthetic of this game is beautiful. The music is very bright and fun. The colors pop. It has a very goofy animation style for a lot of the cutscenes. The character designs really pop. It's an amazing aesthetic, and I think it needs to be acknowledged more either way. Now, if you know me, you know I had to talk about this game. Number 7 on the list is Neon White. Neon White is a first-person action game with an emphasis on movement, and the aesthetic here, man, is sick, man. The emphasis on light blue and white colors with the Hellenistic architecture give the game a heaven-like aesthetic. The other standout aspect of this game's vibe is the music, man. The soundtrack was composed by Machine Girl, and it's a high energy drum and bass soundtrack that adds a futuristic quality to the game. And finally, the UI, which I think is just cool as hell, or heaven, for absolutely no reason. Particularly this part with the main character's portrait and this random flavor text is just cool and very distinct. That is how you do aesthetic. Number 6 for me is probably the most obscure game on the list, and it's ESP Ra De Psi. This game is a shmup developed by Cave and was originally released in arcades back in 1998, but later had a PS4 and Nintendo Switch port that released in 2019. This game is still only released in Japan, by the way, but okay, let's talk about how cool this game's presentation is. These are some of the best looking sprites I've seen in a 2D shmup. Not only are they well animated, but the character and boss designs look really cool. A lot of 2D shmups have you just playing as a ship or a plane, but ESP Ra De Psi is a breath of fresh air. It has a cast of diverse characters with cool psychic abilities. Very unique vibe for this genre. And my favorite aspect of this game's aesthetic is the console port's UI. It is information overload and just looks cool as hell. Even the level completion screen is stylish. Come on. Number 5 on this list is Metroid Prime 2, and I think for most of you, I don't need to give too much history on this game, but for the uninitiated, this game is the sequel to Metroid Prime and was released on GameCube and then re-released on Wii and then ported to the Wii U. The art direction for the environments are incredible. The music has a unique down-tempo electronic feel inspired by artists like Artetre. And while this is also the case for Metroid Prime 1 and 3, Metroid Prime 2 has a couple specific touches to the UI that put it above Metroid Prime 1 and 3 for me. First of all, just look at the pause menu. This game's aesthetic is so underrated. People do not like, they made the menu a molecule that you have to rotate to choose your options. They leaned into this Y2K scientific sci-fi aesthetic. And the game over screen for Metroid Prime 2 is maximalist sci-fi graphic design at its best. It literally shows Samus getting a heart attack, going as far as having a zoom in on her heart. It's the most involved game over screen in the trilogy and adds even more intensity to this game's overall vibe. Number 4 on the list is Lumines. This is a puzzle game created by Tetsuya Mizuguchi, originally released on the PSP. And Lumines is synesthesia in the form of a game. The soundtrack is very avant-garde and experimental. The spark effects and light trails are animated in a very satisfying way, and the backgrounds are just really fun and crazy. Due to the minimalist nature of block puzzle games, there isn't much else I can say here, but this game's aesthetic is very addictive, and I can spend hours just getting lost in it. Number 3 on the list is 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. 13 Sentinels is an adventure game developed by Vanillaware and was released in 2019. Now let me say this. Among my circle, this game has received a lot of praise, even for its art style. But I actually think with the level of visual presentation on display here, it deserves praise even beyond the niche bubble that I exist in. Not just for its art style, but even the tower defense battle portions of the game have an amazing aesthetic. The pre-battle preparation screen has a sharp, futuristic look with blocky text and an orange and black colorway. And in the battles themselves, for as simple as the actual animations and attacks are, the UI does a lot of cool, heavy lifting. Wireframe models that represent your mech, hazy blue transmission screens when pilot characters are having dialogue, and short animated vignettes that give you a mental image of what your attacks are actually doing. It is a really interesting way of using UI to create a convincing atmosphere. The game's 3 main sections are represented on this screen right here, and I honestly have never seen anything like this from a graphic design perspective in a game, but it really pops. And of course, the game's gorgeous art style speaks for itself. It literally looks like a moving manga. So yeah, for me personally, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is one of the most aesthetically pleasing games of all time and needs to be talked about more. Number 2 on the list is Wipeout Pure / Wipeout 3 because I couldn't just choose one game. Now it's gonna be hard to keep this one short, but I'm gonna try. So Wipeout is a futuristic racing series developed by Studio Liverpool, formerly Psygnosis. And depending on who you ask, This game's aesthetic is either underrated or very popular. What I mean by this is graphic designers definitely give Wipeout its flowers, but within the larger gaming community in 2024, this game deserves way more acknowledgement alongside some of the games that I say do get acknowledgement, like Persona 5, Earthbound, and Jet Set Radio. It is in that league, in my opinion, especially when you consider that Sony has closed Studio Liverpool and the series hasn't had much activity recently outside of a mobile game that bombed and got shut down, I guess. But yeah, I think Wipeout is up there. Anyway, let's talk about why this series is so high on the list for me. The iconography for Wipeout 3 was crafted by the highly influential graphic design agency Designers Republic. The team logos have a colorful, futuristic vector design look to them. The title screen has a medium brown background with sharp, futuristic text and makes great use of negative space to give the UI a very clean, sleek aesthetic. And Wipeout Pure's UI has a similar appeal, but just with a brighter colorway. The racetracks for these games are gorgeous too. They got street tunnels with moody lighting, bright colored boost paths, and in-game universe billboard advertising that really sells you on the fact that you're racing through a futuristic metropolis. And on top of all that, the soundtracks for these games consist of some amazing electronica that really sets the tone. They even got Aphex Twin on here, come on. So whether it's the graphic design, the racetracks, or the music, the Wipeout games are really sick, and I just hope we can continue to acknowledge their legacy, even if the franchise never makes a return. Number 1 on my list is Killer 7, and man, let's get into it. This game is a shooter developed by Suda51 with Capcom. And not only do I think this game's aesthetic needs to be acknowledged a bit more, but this is also my favorite aesthetic of all time, and it pretty much hits hard in every category. In terms of setting, it's a mix of psychological thriller, noir, and horror. You play as Harmon Smith, a guy with 7 different personalities, and the character designs for each personality are very distinct, ranging from a wrestler that dual wields grenade guns to a shirtless guy with a knife. The art style of this game is incredible and makes heavy use of shadows to drive home the noir vibes. The UI is messy, but in a very punk kind of way. In the save room, for example, you can upgrade your characters, and the UI here is a TV where you change channels to choose the character you want to upgrade. The TV knob has a pre-rendered 3D texture, and there's a slight fisheye effect on this screen as well. The combination of all these things gives this part of the game a very distinct look. Another aspect of this game's aesthetic that really stands out to me is the use of camera angles. At the end of Angel's boss fight, you roll up on her slowly at the end in the wheelchair, and the camera is close below you while also keeping Angel in the shot. You then zoom in on her for the final shot while she just sits there completely still. In addition to her character design having a stereotypical anime look that clashes with the rest of the cast, this whole scene from a visual standpoint was unsettling and weird in the best way possible. Generally speaking, also, the camera also changes angles when you reload. All of these odd touches add up and give this game one of the most unique visual presentations that I've ever seen. I could also go on and on about the enemy designs and the environments too. To sum it up though, the only word I can think of to describe this game's presentation is sincere. It feels like looking into the mind of someone who wants to combine all of their influences in a way that is specific to who they are. It's very distinct and very original. So yeah, that's my list. What are your thoughts though, and are there any games that you think are aesthetically underrated? Let me know. It's GK. Peace out.